Hey, welcome back to Mornings with the Mayor. I'm your host, Mayor Robert C. Dye. We're taking another inside look into what's happening in Farmers Branch. And as you know, a hot topic item in our city recently has been the potential renovation at the library. While nothing's been decided, we've had several more community meetings, engagements, and just kind of discussions about what the future is for Manske Library. And in order to just have a more in-depth conversation about that in our library and understand where we currently are, what the futures of the library might be, and how they impact communities, I'm going to be joined today on episode 13 by our own library director, Denise Wallace. Denise, how are you doing today?
Oh, awesome. Lucky 13. I'm glad to be here.
I know. Well, we had a lot of conversation before last week's show about actually which number episode this was. So now that we got that nailed down, because counting's might not be my strong suit, we had that figured out. So it was easy to say, hey, this one's 13. It's not an elevator. We're not just going to skip over it and
No.
just act like it doesn't exist. But
Right.
here we go. But how's your family doing?
My family is doing great. So, with COVID and everything and the shelter in place, my husband is home longer than usual, but we're still together. We're still doing well. And it's kind of interesting with everything that's going on. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention my bulldog. My bulldog is doing great, Miss Cleo. She comes to the library now and then, but she is benefiting the most from this kind of stay-at-home situation. So thanks for asking.
That's good. That's good. I guess that's one of the true stresses that people don't really talk about, is that significant others have to spend a lot more time together now.
Yes.
So
Yes.
definitely creates a few more challenges, but hey, for some people, maybe that's more opportunity. But I mean, you do live in Farmers Branch, and so
I do. I've been
just
here, my gosh, almost 30 years now. I can't believe that. My very first home was purchased in Farmers Branch. Home ownership is different today than it was, several years ago when I was just starting out. So my first home was on Maydale Lane over by Austell Boulevard, and now I'm over in the Brookhaven area. So I love it.
And I guess before taking the library director job, I guess what were you doing before then? Or is it always been a library?
No, it hasn't. So my original undergrad degree was North Texas State University before it became University of North Texas, dating myself. And that's where I went to get my interior design degree with a very minor in architecture. So I did that for a brief stint and then got married and had a kiddo. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school so that I could be in an environment with the school district. So I thought I was going to be a teacher, an educator. And I credit my sister for going into the library field. She said, no, everybody wants to be the librarian. And so I went back, got the MLS degree, and that way I didn't have to be in the classroom. And I taught, I ran the library in Grand Prairie ISD for several years.
Okay.
In elementary and middle school. And then the youth services position opened up in Farmers Branch here at Manske Library. So I started off as the youth services supervisor. And then a couple of years later, the directorship opened up and I threw my hat in the ring, and y'all are stuck with me now. I've been here for 5, going on to 6 years as the library director. And I love it. I just consider it a great privilege to be able to work in my community in the library.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of my really good friends, I guess she has NLS as well, and I didn't really understand how much goes into being the librarian at one of the schools. She taught at the elementary level, but I mean the amount of work that you do with each teacher to work on curriculum and building some of that base, I just never understood that. When you learn about that, you're like, man, I didn't realize how integrated they were into the schools instead of just mastering their own little domain there in the school. So it's definitely it was an eye opener, but it was a good one because it gives you a little bit more of an appreciation for what goes into the art and science behind libraries. But how are things going at Manske Library right now? Like what's I know that it's tough given COVID, the number of people that can actually come by, but you guys did a great job adopting, dropping off books to residents and doing other things and opening up the circulation for people that are just, craving different stuff right now since they can't get to
Right.
certain stores, or you just don't want to always rely on Amazon, just because when times are tough, that's what the public library is there for. It's free resources and opportunities to educate yourself and read. And so just wondering what it's kind of been like recently and how has circulation look like and programming with, limited hours and, occupancy.
Oh my gosh, that's all such a loaded question. When we first shut down, Friday the 13th, I'm telling you, 13's a good number here. We had no idea what the future was going to be for our library, for all the buildings in the city for that matter. And we immediately regrouped as a staff. I would be remiss if I didn't give just an amazing shout out to my staff. They are just very servant minded and very civic minded, and they love what they do. They love connecting with the community. And that's what a public library is connecting with that community. So we were able to still plan a lot of programs and a lot of outreach virtually. And it's actually taken us more time to do it virtually than we realized than actually being on site. There's something about missing that in-person connection that's challenging, but yet we still saw a great need in the community for people to be able to access their books, their physical books. That was just really important to a lot of our residents. So then we were able to open up part-time about 2 months into the quarantine, and we were able to do home delivery of materials in conjunction with the Parks and Rec department. And they actually did the delivery. We pulled all the materials together. And then starting May 4th, after the governor gave the directive, we're going to go ahead and open our libraries back up. We were a little concerned at first because COVID, everybody's got a different comfort level with, with the masks and the social distancing and everything in between. So we opened up part-time for a bit and actually saw quite a few people coming in, and we started a senior hour from 9 to 10 initially. Now we're back to 10 to 11 during our regular hours. So we are open full time, and we are one of the only public libraries in the entire North Texas area that is open for the full-time hours that we are open. Like I said, we were a little hesitant at first, but we got together as a team, and that's one of the things I really, really like about our library staff is we're very team oriented, and we try to, we've got people out on the floor dealing with the public, helping the public on a daily basis, and so it's important that we have that support system among ourselves. And so we still have the senior hour from 10 to 11. We open at 10, we close at 9 Monday through Thursday. And so, we're open full 64 hours a week. And everybody, the public has just been awesome. I mean, I've got to give a shout out to the public too. They have been wearing their masks. They understand we're trying to stay open. We don't want to shut back down. They're grateful that they can come in, get their materials, they can use the computers. There's a big need to use the computers right now. And we're still practicing social distance measures as well. So yeah.
Well, I mean, being a library that's open more than, that has our hours are definitely, as you just said, we're open more than other libraries in the area. What are we doing differently to ensure the safety of our patrons? Because to me, it seems like it's been going very well. And so, what lessons could be learned from that other libraries could glean from us to say, how could we be open more? Is it just a unique situation of, Farmers Branch we're a smaller community and it's more of a private library? Yeah.
It's hard for me to speak to what the other communities are doing. Obviously, the anchor library system is the Dallas Public Library System. It is the largest system in our area. So to compare them to us is a vastly different animal. We're a smaller community. And it was kind of a directive from, our city management and our city council team. They looked at everything as a whole as well. And it's like, we see this as an essential business. We see this as an essential need for our community. And so we do have computers spaced apart. We do have tables pulled apart from each other. Chairs are not right on top each other. And the study rooms are currently closed. They're very small. We don't want people gathering in those spaces. And there's also a janitorial staff that has to come in and sanitize everything throughout the day. And and they do that frequently. And as I pointed out, I think the public has been a big part of why this is successful. And, they are coming in, they're being respectful of one another, and they're being respectful of approaching the staff at the desk and things like that. And we have had other staff from other cities, other library staff coming in and just saying, hey, we hear you're open. You mind, can we look around? Can we see how y'all are doing this? Absolutely. Because it's all about one community now. We're all different communities, but yet we are all one more community together than we've ever been before in very strange circumstances.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of just jump into some stuff here, you brought it up. A lot more people are using the computers right now. And that's because not everyone has access to internet.
Correct.
Not everyone has the ability to do what they need to do, especially in a tough time. And I look at, as society moves forward and we move more tech-based, why should we keep libraries? Why are we not just creating more of an online platform and investing in digital infrastructure in a city rather than the physical structure to, just create, if we were able to provide broadband or Wi-Fi in every single home in the city of Farmers Branch, or just residents, whether you're multifamily or not, has access to the internet and it's more of a online platform, what is the argument to be made of why we still need to keep our library?
Oh gosh, people still need help. Excuse me. They still need help. They still need direction. We are a very internet, digital driven society, and you hit the nail on the head. Very few people have access to those resources. There's a safety component. People come in, they feel safe in a library environment. They feel like the information that they get in that library is accurate and professional and correct, because that's one of the things we really pride ourselves on as librarian professionals is we try to stay as objective as possible. We try to stay as nonpartisan as we possibly can. And I think you would just see a national outcry if libraries disappeared. And sadly, there are some communities, in our state, in our nation, where cities are struggling with budgets. And I think the city of Farmers Branch really values being able to provide this service to the community. And we do see a rise in access to our e-resources right now, obviously. Some people are not comfortable coming into the library, but they are so grateful that they still have resources available to them that they can use. And the number one reason, amazingly enough, that people still come into, studies show, coming into the library is to get that physical book in their hands, not necessarily the e-resources. So, I mean, I could go on and on. The ALA, for instance, the American Library Association, that started back in 1876. I mean, that's been around a long time to provide library resources to the public free of charge. Well, free is kind of an oxymoron, but these are publicly funded, tax funded institutions, and we still have. Gosh, I mean, I hate to just say a lot. I don't have a number for you, but we have a lot of people that come through those doors and use all kinds of resources. Literacy comes in many formats. It's not just reading a book. There's financial literacy. There's, all kinds of formats. If you are engaged in a number of programs and outreach, then you are promoting education at that point. So your libraries are an educational institution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that was the reason they were founded in, back in the late 1800s, right? Like all we had then was books. That was our educational resource. Right. The tools that we have available to us today are wide ranging. And it's fascinating to see how fast we're moving and the different ways that the current generation and past generations need to, or I guess not past generations, but just kind of the older generations need to engage with technology and different platforms in terms of how are they going to educate themselves and keep themselves ready for what's next. I mean, you look at, as we just talked about, the tech space, it's coding, it's STEM, it's robotics, it's a lot of these things are driving us forward that people need to engage with, but you can't just readily go get that. You can't access those tools or engage with things like that. And when I want to, I guess here in a little bit, talk about the future of libraries, it's things like that it's like, how do you have access to that? Because I do hear arguments and understand them that, hey, more people, you can learn anything on YouTube. You can learn anything on the internet as long as you have a connection. But, kids also have libraries at schools. You have libraries at Brookhaven. You have libraries at your college. Like, with all those resources that are funded by other tax dollars and readily available to people, why do we still need this physical structure in our community? Or is there even a benefit to upgrading it? Is it just kind of keeping it where it is? Or, what changes might need to be made in the inside to address some of the shortfalls that we might have? And a follow-up question to that would be, what do you see as some of the things that are lacking that we might need to add, regardless of the level of renovation, if any, is done in the Farmers Branch Library?
Wow, again, a loaded question, and I'm still trying to figure out where to look on here. I think I'm looking straight into the camera.
Yeah, my camera's to the left. It's tough.
I keep looking at you, but I'm looking down. But anyway, what? If I may, I did pull up some history of the library building, and I thought I'd just briefly touch on this, kind of segueing into this. So we started off with the Farmers Branch Library opening in the old Farmers Branch Municipal Building in 1949. So that's when our library started. It's been around a long time, not in the actual physical location. And then in the 1960s, of course, I'm going to mess up my little slide here. In the 1960s is when it moved into the old gun club. And then the library eventually moved into the building that it's in now, which used to be the fire station. So that part of the structure has been around since, oh goodness, I believe the late 1950s, somewhere along that line. And once that fire station was turned into the library building that we are in now, it was renamed the Farmers Branch Manske Library after a very involved civic servant in the city. And then in the 1980s, the 1970s and the 1980s, that's when renovations started coming along to go from just the repository of books, kind of like we talked about, to upgrade to the online catalog system. So, people who have been around a while, they know that, we used to have the card catalog, you get open the drawers and look for the information. We don't have that anymore. So now it's the same thing. It's just in an online environment. So the last renovations we had to that library were in the 1980s, in the mid 1980s, and that was the expansion to the existing building. And so it's fascinating to me where we're at today. So we're in a building that was, originally designed as a fire station, and then it was repurposed to be an actual library building, and it was expanded onto. And the community was just so excited to be able, number one, to have a library. Not all communities have a library, and I think that's worth pointing out. Libraries are not cheap to operate. Nothing in a city building is cheap to operate. And so the fact that we have a library is just, is really special. And I think people need to be reminded of that because libraries, like I said, they could disappear at some point in some communities. I don't see that happening in Farmers Branch. I think there is a great love and a great respect for being able to provide this quality of life service to our residents. And so that being said, it is time to look at, okay, well, we have renovated from 1949 up to 1960, up to the 1970s and 80s. And libraries are really community centered, and they are really big on promoting the educational institutions. What are we going to do with our schools? They're about to open up in the fall, and they're under the most challenging circumstances there are. We don't have a lot of study room space that we could offer to school environments, homeschool environments. There's a great need for more Wi-Fi to reach out into the building, into the outside of the building even. And we want to invest in our buildings so that they remain relevant to the growth of the city. We've got this amazing growth that's about to happen out on the west side. And, how are we going to service all these people in an aging building? That being said, I also know that that building itself is very beloved by the community, Robert. And there's a great challenge right now. Do we leave it as is, or do we invest in some improvements? And what do those improvements look like? So I want this library to be around 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And that's the challenge we're faced with, is how do we make that happen? And there's just no easy answer to that. So there's a lot of voices, and all those voices are important. I mean, it's important to look at the whole, the good, the bad, the ugly, I like to say. We can't just stay stagnant forever, but at the same time, we don't want to lose the charm and the ambiance of what we currently have, if that makes sense. And I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but
no,
yeah.
I mean, you're bringing up a lot of good points, and it's tough, because I hear you. There are a lot of voices. There are a lot of people that are on different sides.
Yes,
passionate.
people are passionate. And that's a good thing and a bad thing with libraries. But libraries bring out a lot of passion in people, and I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the history, because what I found most interesting about that story is Farmers Branch kind of incorporated a city in 1946.
Right.
And 3 years later, we had a library, which shows there's an emphasis on education. And it's something that's been kept up, maintained, and renovated throughout the history of our city until this last renovation. And we're sitting here as this council looking at it as like, okay, what needs to be done next, just because of where we're at. But I definitely, hear the residents that because of, the potential bond for the new library failed, you have people on the side like, well, that means we don't need to do anything. And I think council has never maintained that. It was, hey, something was going to happen. We just don't know what and to what level. And we're looking and seeking more input. We've been having conversations, as you well know, with various members of the community to kind of figure that out and take a slower approach. And, here we are at budget season trying to figure out what we want to do. But I mean, you brought up a great point and keep touching back to that, which is education, which, as we all know, is the great equalizer in society. People having the ability to educate themselves and lift themselves up is paramount to just future success. But how do we create a community centered around that education that realizes that the driving force of the library, the main focus of why they built what they did and why, it became so important to society was because people that didn't have access to books, or in this day and age, people that don't have access to the right technology to educate themselves need something like that. So how do we leverage that to help build a community that's centered and truly centered around education? And how are we helping to build lifelong learners at our library and encouraging that and supporting that kind of effort, whether you're 3 or whether you're 95?
Right. Well, I think you kind of hit on something too. The library is such a central hub to this community. All the service buildings provide such a service to the community. Some of them are a little more tailored to maybe a certain age group or a certain activity. And the library is, it's truly open to everybody. There's no fee to walk in. We don't police you at the door. Are you a resident? You can't come in if you're not a resident. My goodness, hopefully we never get to that point. But as far as, you could take the slant of, we don't really need a building. Let's just make sure everybody has access to e-resources. Well, that's not cheap. You're going to have more of an opportunity to serve a greater community in a central hub location where the resources, the electronic resources, the print resources, the staff resources, all of that combined, the phone resources, people can call in, they don't have to physically come in. There's got to be a building for people to congregate in. Just like we don't, our schools are not all online. We're not just providing laptops and devices to everybody. There's no way anybody could afford that. That is just a monstrous cost. So being able to provide access to, physical PCs on site and laptops, and, at some point, maybe we can provide laptops that people can check out along with a Wi-Fi unit that they can take home with them, because there is a need for that. But again, that's, there's a cost involved to all of that. And there's maintenance involved with all of that. And there are license fees involved with all of that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't necessarily know or understand. And, and there's no reason for them to. It's kind of like our feet are moving really fast under the water, but, on top of the water, we look like everything's calm and serene, or at least we like to think that's how we look when we are working at the library. That's true of all the departments. And, people don't want to come in and be overwhelmed with, this is what goes on to make this happen. They just want to come in, enjoy that experience, know that they are getting accurate information and they are being able to find the information that they're looking for. And it's getting harder and harder to get factual information in a lot of times. And sometimes people, they'll come in and ask us questions. We don't give advice. That's one thing we're very careful about. We do not give advice. That's not our job, but we're going to do our best to direct you to resources to help you make an informed decision about whatever it is you're looking about. So it's our hope and our goal every day that when people come in, they find what they're looking for before they leave. And that's what keeps them coming back to the facility time and time again. And kind of like we were talking about, that's why, at some point buildings do get old. They get very old, and you do have to invest some sort of upkeep in them. But again, that's to be determined. But you don't want a structure that is just falling down around you, which, by the way, this one is not. I want to be sure to say that.
It's absolutely not.
No. I mean, it's an amazing building. It really is. But there's upkeep to a building. That remains to be said. You've got to maintain a building. At some point, buildings do age out, so to speak. And so that's kind of the challenge is, what do we need to do to continue that outreach to the community? We're also getting out into the community, although right now we're not because of COVID. There's not a lot of large gatherings. So we're finding a lot of people are coming in and they're like, this is one of the last places I can actually come to and still feel safe and still feel like I'm finding information that I need. And, I don't have to worry about my family, going out to a large gathering or anything like that. And so yeah, there's a need for the library, Robert. There's always going to, libraries have been around for a long time and they are malleable, and we like to call them the great chameleons. We are going to roll with the punches and try to serve the public. The public is constantly changing. We've got new people moving into our area. We've got a very eclectic community. We've got a very diverse community. How do we reach all of those people? And we don't always have the answers, but it's a lot of fun trying to serve everyone the best that we are able to.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think about different ways that we serve people. And, I've come up there and do some reading to kids from time to time, because we all read on the same grade level. And
this is true.
It's
nothing like a picture book. Nothing like a picture book. Yes.
Yeah. It's just more fun if you ask me. But it's what are we doing in terms of literacy and literacy outreach to the kids? Because I know that, studies have shown that if kids by third grade are reading on a third grade reading level, their probability of future success is just astronomically higher than what it is if that isn't the case. And I know that's been a focus of different things going on in CFB-ISD and DISD and some of the schools that we're looking to how do we get, a community that's caught up, that has some challenges due to just some socioeconomic disadvantages that, what can we do to help? What are different ways that we have of, I guess, what are our literacy programs that are trying to help in that? And what are the different ways that we're trying to help support the schools in those efforts as well?
Well, obviously summer reading is going on right now. Summer reading is, public library's Super Bowl. This is the time of year that the teachers are glad to send the kids out after May, and we get them for the short time of summer. And we do just a lot of reading. That is the number one literacy skill that we can teach these kids. So our youth programs, our story times, they're all online right now, for instance. We miss our families, and we miss those kids, and they miss us. Whenever you work with kids, they're very literal, and they're very they bond very easily. So by the time they start coming to the library and coming to story times, there's a lot of repetition, for instance, in story times. Those kids know what to expect when they come here. And a lot of times your public libraries, that is a family's number one access to education before they get into the classroom, because by the time they get into kindergarten, it is so fast paced and it is just off and running, and some kids have a greater advantage than other kids. So literacy is still, that's one of my great passions. I would love to see more opportunities to even teach adult literacy, for instance. We still have a huge illiteracy problem in our nation, but we don't necessarily see that because we all run with our, with our chosen circles, and we get into our comfort zones and what have you. But there is nothing more powerful than just reading a book with a child. Getting high school kids, we're hoping to get back to this. We've been away from this since COVID has hit. Get the high school kids and the college kids involved in coming in and, having like homework help at the end of the day, or just reading skills at the end of the day. And you just let a child literally sound out their words and sound out their vowels and everything in between. And this is my youth supervisor, my elementary school days coming out in me, but there's just something very powerful about teaching the entire family unit. It's not just about teaching the child, but it's about helping that brand new mom. We have baby bounce. I mean, you can get a library card as early as 1 day old. So listen to that, everybody. So library cards are free to all Farmers Branch residents, and anything you can do to get that information in your hands, be it physically or look at you.
Look at me, yeah.
That, but I don't have it in front of me. I promise you I have it.
I knew it was in the drawer right next to me. So I was like, I can just grab that right now.
Look at you. So yeah, get a library card. I mean, that's a big part of literacy in and of itself. There are just thousands of e-resources available, databases and ebooks and audiobooks and even movies. There's just so many different styles of reading as well. We find that reaching boys is a lot more difficult than reaching girls as a whole. They don't read stories as much, but they will read magazines and they will read graphic novels and things like that. And then, of course, any opportunities that we have to actually get into the schools, if we're invited to come to a family literacy night or any kind of family night, we try to just be present and, just be seen. Hey, we're the Farmers Branch Manske Library. We try to get into any events that we can. And so we're constantly trying to take the library on the road, if you will, and just make people aware of what resources are. A lot of people don't even know they live in Farmers Branch. Then this is fascinating to me. And I learned that the first time at the market last summer. We had a table set up and we had young families that had moved into some apartments, and they literally thought they lived in the Dallas area. And I'm like, no, actually you live in Farmers Branch proper. And so it's just educating people and, answering their questions. And to me, that's what literacy is all about, is being available, answering those questions, meeting that need. And that need is constantly changing. And what's going on in the schools right now, we don't know what that's going to look like for the public library. I don't know what we can do to help that process, but we're open to ideas, because that is such an unknown right now, starting back in August, and families are going to need all the help that they can get. So,
yeah. And I mean, it's not just the kids, it's adults, it's individuals that have, their own business. And I know some of that stuff was outlined in some of the presentations we've received from Gensler, to where, it's more open space to just read and chat and be able to converse, but then there's private space where it's more of a quiet area. But then you also saw some integration of co-working space to where, what opportunities are there for that in the future? And where do you have you seen that succeed in any other libraries that have been kind of transformed recently, to where, you're seeing more of that, to where it's a coffee shop, to where you can take meetings, but where you can maybe set up your shop and build your business and have a place to do it that's, has a lot of the resources that you need that you might not be able to afford, to help you grow that into a place where it's like, I've now grown from the library to an actual office, because, we were able to provide that kind of incubator space. And just
Right.
wondering if you've seen any success stories about that, or what does the
Oh,
future
yeah.
of that actually look like?
I think libraries that are being either refurbished or, built from the ground up, just in the North Texas area, just in the state, you're seeing exactly what you just described. I mean, they're not just investing in a building and moving forward with what is. I think libraries are constantly looking out to the future. What is it that we can do to help our communities be successful? What is it that we can do to help our communities be educated and learned? And studies show that a public library in a community is a big draw for people choosing a community to move into. Right now, we don't have a lot of space for business entities. People, like, if they need to come in and we've got a copy machine, we've got a fax machine, things like that, but we don't have like a whole little business area where people can come in and print up things they need, or bind materials, or whatever the business community might need in a public library setting. We're not meeting that need right now, and we just don't have the capability to do that. So that's just one example. But everything that I have seen, if you have been to the Austin Public Library, it is like the premier library in the nation right now. It's getting a lot of global awards. It's amazing. Obviously, we're not going to be able to provide anything on that level. That is a community of 1 million plus. But they chose, for whatever reason, to truly invest in a community library center. And I think you're seeing libraries get away from the word library all by itself as well, because it is becoming more of a community gathering space, an educational space. And I just can't say it enough. Technology is expensive. It's just not easy to meet all the growing needs of people needing access to electronic resources. And our schools are being more demanding of things online, and they're being handed laptops or iPads or something like that to take home. And there is a considerable cost involved in that. So yeah, if people can come to the library, get those resources, meet in a large space. I'm a big believer, if we could even move Wi-Fi out into the park space a little bit, people can gather outside the building as well and still have access to a restroom, possibly a coffee shop, something like that. We have people coming in constantly. I need to warm up my coffee. Where can I do that? Not here.
Yeah.
So, people love to come in. They'll bring in a pizza box or a to-go order or something, and we don't have a space for them to sit down and have a meal while they're in the space as well. So it's changing. It's changing a lot, and we hate to say no. That's one thing. We do not like to tell people no, but occasionally the answer is no. I'm sorry, we don't have that capability. We'd appreciate you filling out a comment card and passing that up the food chain. So it's tough. It's a myriad of people, and a myriad of opinions, and a myriad of opportunities that we're trying to meet on a very limited budget. So I hope that somewhat answers your question.
Yeah, and you brought up the Austin Library, which is the gold standard
that's
now.
That's my hometown, by the way. I grew up in Austin, so I had to plug it. Yeah.
Had to plug it. But I mean, you look at the Austin Library, you look at even Toronto's new library. Yeah. You look at Arlington's.
Arlington is beautiful. Yes.
And you just look at the economic benefits that they tout. And granted, those are much larger markets than Farmers Branch, but with world-renowned facilities that have kind of changed the game and reimagined that space and built it towards functionality to where you can move things around and modify and change as the times change. But, they tout economic impacts of $4.6 to $5.6 back for every dollar invested. And how do you think that would relate to Farmers Branch? I mean, we're a much smaller city, smaller population, but are there opportunities there to see similar economic benefit for reinvesting in our own library?
Oh, I do think so. I mean, the library is, like I said, there's no charge to enter the library. Usually you have to have a reason to go to some structures in any city. If you want to, work out at the rec center, you've got to have a membership. Well, our membership is for card holders. And, even if you're not a card holder, you can still come in and use those resources on site, that kind of thing. It's that networking opportunity. You get people that normally, there's not a lot of places that you can go to just sit and network and talk about different things that are going on, whether it's a school environment or a work environment, or, families, needing to get together to discuss something. And we also have, rental space in the library. So we have the meeting room and the conference room, for instance. There is a fee that is charged by the city currently. Now, right now, those meetings aren't happening due to the pandemic, but there's an opportunity to, recoup some cost in that way. And like I said, if you have some sort of a coffee shop or anything like that, that's not a huge moneymaker, of course, but it's the economic impact of getting people into the city. I think that's where the biggest impact is with your public library, because the library is not a money maker. And, if people want to come here, they might meet up at the library, and while they're here, oh, let's go down, the road, let's go to Nuevo Leon and have lunch today. Or, hey, there's a big event going on later, let's stay the night and, go to something like that. There's just all kinds of opportunities for that central hub for people to meet up and, network and gather information. So that's my take on it anyway.
Is someone who works for themselves, I see that all the time in the different coffee shops that I go to around the Metroplex, just because, you go in there and it's always people meeting and they're having conversations, they're collaborating, but they're doing so because, hey, I can get a cup of coffee, I can have a conversation, and it's a cool kind of atmosphere that, new libraries are trying to lend themselves to that, to be like, how can we be that same conduit to where you have other opportunities as well, that, there's certain things that you can do at a library that you can't do at a coffee shop. And if you have co-working space, if you have technology, if you have different things, it definitely helps out and helps build. But, it's all, it's
an investment. It is an investment. Yeah.
And so I just wonder, why should individuals in this day and age, like I said, and what I touched on earlier, invest in a library? Like, what are the roles in the future, just given technology and where it's at? And, you see, like you said, you touched on it, big cities like Austin doing it. Granted, we've, that it's a completely different story there, but, why should communities our size, should communities our size look to do, not to the same thing, but look to upgrade and provide new opportunities and new spaces within a library that a lot of people are saying we don't need to? And I can understand both sides of the story. I just wondered what would be the benefit to the investment in the library?
Well, I keep going back to quality of life. Can you imagine our community if our library didn't exist? That's kind of my go-to answer. And I don't really have the answer, to be honest with you. But the one thing that I hear people, I can't tell you how many people come in and say, oh my gosh, I grew up in this library. I came here as a little kid, and now I'm bringing my own kids. And there's something very nostalgic about that people really enjoy. We have people that don't come into the library at all, but they're very passionate about how they feel about either investing in it or not investing in it. So finding that why is difficult because everybody has a different why. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, libraries are constantly having to reinvent themselves. We're constantly having to prove our need and our worth. And I can't always put my finger on it, but Robert, we're still there. We're still functioning, and we're talking about the future of the library. And I think that in and of itself is a huge, feather in our cap right there. Sometimes people don't really know why they like something. They just know that they enjoy coming. And like I said at one point, if this library was to disappear in 20 years, which, dear goodness me, I hope that never would happen, there would be such a deficit in this city that this service provides, and, like the economic impact of all of it. Why do we have a rec center? Why do we have a senior center? Why do we have a historical park? We could just be a city that has a city hall, city council, a police, and a fire department, and we would exist and we could have some nice homes, but we'd have to go into other cities to enjoy their resources. And we want our tax dollars to stay within our city. And I think the library is a part of that equation.
Yeah. That's kind of the Addison model, right? Mm-hmm. Like they've taken that approach. And I guess
Right.
you just have to decide what works for you. But
Correct.
it's a little easier for them to take that approach because they're looking at reconstructing a brand new facility and startup and doing all that. Whereas we've had something since 1949,
Right.
something that's
Right.
just been ingrained in our community for almost its entire history. And
Right.
so, what is kind of a final question here on the library? What success stories have you seen from a library just being run of the mill and completely transforming? And what kind of positive change did that bring to a community, especially given the company you work for, LS&S?
Right.
They have locations all around. I'm sure there's
Oh, yeah.
success stories from there, and I'm just
Yeah.
curious to see what have you seen elsewhere that you know was a good model for change and renovation and reimagination that Farmers Branch could glean to potentially help us as we look to the future of our library.
Oh, well, I've been a library systems and services, LS&S employee for 7 years now. I believe the city went into contract with them back in 2011. So coming up on 10 years. I think one of the biggest success stories is that we're still working. LS&S was able to, continue to provide the resources to keep us all employed in conjunction with the city itself. So that's a huge success story, I think. And then just individual success stories. I've gotten letters from patrons who have told me how incredibly life-saving the library has been to them when they were going. I had one letter from a lady who was going through a horrible time in her life, and the only thing that sustained her was being able to get books and come to the library without, any judgment or anything like that. So for people to take the time to write you a letter and show their gratitude for what you are able to provide from them, you don't hear about things like that very often. And then I think the other part of your question was, moving forward, what are the success stories? And well, since I've been here, we've had several improvements made to that library. Not anything monumental, but baby steps. As long as we are moving in a positive direction, we are growing and we are serving a need. And so we're at that pinnacle right now of what are we going to do to make sure this library continues to stay here to serve this community.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all that you're doing, the leadership, and then especially the hardworking staff that's up there that's serving this community during
They
this
love what
difficult
they
time.
do. Yeah,
Yeah,
they absolutely love what they do. And I mean, I can't say enough about just the community in general and being able to interact with all of the department heads on a weekly basis. Sometimes I don't know everything going on at the city level because I'm not a direct city employee. But it's really important that I know what's going on because a lot of the population comes into the library and we are able to ferret people out to the correct place in the city that they are needing to go to or needing information from. So
yeah,
it's definitely a team partnership um, situation, however you want to word it. But our library works, and I can't say enough good things about the city, and I can't say enough good things about my existing employer. For whatever reason, it's a very positive relationship, and if for some reason the city ever decided, hey, we're not sure we can maintain this contract anymore, you'd still have the same staff. I would hope you'd still have me because I'm not going to go down easy. I will go kicking and screaming. But we have
well,
quite a few residents. Yeah.
yeah, well, we just like that you can get to work in 3 minutes.
I can 5 minutes
Yeah,
if I hit the light. Yes.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But there was one quote in the presentation that we had at the library when this was all brought back up, and it kind of stuck with me. And for me, regardless of what happens, to me, it's I'm in. I guess I'm gonna see where we can go, what it looks like, continue to listen to the public. But as long as it maintains the aspect of this quote, I'm fine with however it turns out. But it was that the library is a place of inspiration. It belongs to each of us, and it should make us feel welcome, comfortable, and personally connected. And as long as we can provide that with zero renovations or all the renovations, I think we've succeeded, and that's just what we need to continue to strive for, as well as finding ways to continue to educate our entire community and provide resources that allow each of us to grow however we choose to grow.
Exactly. And I agree with that quote completely. And goodness gracious, I hope we deliver on that every day. It's a privilege to work in this library and serve this community.
Yeah. And so just a few quick questions for you.
Right.
Since you are a resident, what's your favorite place in Farmers Branch? Outside of the library, of course.
Well, of course, the library is one of my favorite. I'd have to say the historical park. I used to serve on the historical park board years ago. Yes. My name is on the plaque by the Peters Colony Land Grant Office. So
I'm gonna go check that out.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I love the historical park.
And I know you touched on it earlier, so it kind of steals a little thunder of the question, but I was going to say, what is the best type of dog to own? And I'm pretty sure you have a hot opinion on that. Well,
I'm going to have to go with the bulldog. So yes, if you don't know Cleopatra, she is my beloved little rescue bulldog. I highly recommend. Occasionally, she is at the library. So if you ask me real nice and she's with me in the office, I'll let you pet her.
And of all the programs that go on at the library, what is your absolute favorite?
Oh gosh, Robert, that is so hard to answer. I absolutely love our story times. I'd have to say that's truly my favorite. But we also have adult services programs that we provide to residents. We have one today, for instance, that's a cross-stitch take it, make it kit, and we ran out of the kits. There was a run on it. We were like, oh, darn. So yeah, gosh, I love it all. Is that a fair answer?
It is. And I mean, that's a great thing to hear, that stuff like that we're running out of it. But,
yes.
I do want to thank you for your time today, for the conversation, but I also want to thank you for your leadership and for you to, just send the staff my absolute best, because I know how hard they work to make hopefully each experience for our residents and our patrons one to remember. So.
Yes. Well, and a big thank you to you. I don't know if everybody knows, I have to give a shout out. Robert, you always come and do our Santa and Cookies program, and you read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. We don't yet know how that's going to work in December, so stand by.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, even if I have to crank up my own fireplace, sit by and read it again.
Have to. Yeah. We could. Yeah, we may have to put you up in the amphitheater from afar. So we'll come up with something. We'll
figure it out.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, thanks again. But just want to thank everyone for watching Mornings with the Mayor. Again, I'm your host, Robert C. Dye. We're doing our best to keep you updated, informed, and engaged. So we'll be back next week with another show, and look forward to talking with y'all then. Until then, take care.